we cannot hear you.
Okay, you should
Now,
be able
perfect.
to hear me now.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Sorry. Yeah, thanks for giving us the opportunity to present also the Bartter and Gitelman subregistry here. If you really listen closely to Adriana, some of the things I will mention will resemble those Adriana already presented, and also some of the pitfalls might be quite similar. The Bartter Gitelman subregistry is one of the younger ones. Whoops. Sorry. And I will try to mention at least shortly these different items mentioned in the email that should be covered by the presentation. So the governance structure of the subregistry, what type of data do we collect, what are the main research questions, and then the outlook on future publications maybe, and the analysis of the data. The governance structure, basically the subregistry is governed mainly by the tubulopathy working group and also by the chairs that are basically at the moment heading the working group, Tom Nijenhuis, Gemma Arizeta, and Martin Conrad. And basically myself, who is basically taking care of the administrative things as well as the data items mainly. The subregistry will, on one hand, regularly report in the working group meetings about the current standing of the subregistry, as well as it will report novel research initiatives. And I think the tubulopathy working group will also mainly be involved in the coordination of publications thereafter. If we talk about the Bartter-Gitelman subregistry, what kind of diseases will be covered in the subregistry? Those are mainly, if you look at the distal nephron, the different forms of Bartter syndrome, mainly located in, or the defects mainly located in the thick ascending limb, together also with one special claudine that's causing the tubulopathy, and in second part on the distal convoluted tubule, where the cause of the Gitelman syndrome is located. And besides the typical NCCT-related Gitelman syndrome, there are also very more rare forms like the mitochondrial forms of Gitelman or HNF1 beta that in some cases might produce a Gitelman or a phenotype similar to Gitelman syndrome, which should also be covered here. What was the main aim, or what are the main aims of the subregistry? This is for sure also similar to what Adriana presented: collection of demographic data, data on incidence and prevalence of the disease. We might also be able to identify patient cohorts with unresolved disease. These are especially interesting for maybe future genetic studies in these types of patients. We will try to perform genotype-phenotype correlations, but as indicated here, the two following points from my point of view are the most interesting ones. One is to monitor the therapy that these patients are receiving, especially electrolyte supplementation and indomethacin treatment, and maybe the side effects of this therapy. And even more critical is the long-term outcome of patients concerning kidney function and proteinuria. If you have taken, or if you paid attention to Adriana's talk, you will be familiar also already with the structure of the ERKReg main registry and already the different subregistries that you are accessing via this page you see here. One of those is the Bartter and Gitelman subregistry. And if you look at the substructure of the registry, or the submenus that will open once you decide to include a patient in the subregistry, consists of the basic data, which is basically shown in the upper part, and the visits or follow-up data that has to be inserted later on, and which also includes the medication. But coming closer to the basic data part, there are also some, as indicated by Adriana, some pitfalls and more complicated things. The focus or why we chose to include the basic data, which is sort of the retrospective part of the subregistry, was the fact that a number of patients supposedly had acute renal failure in the neonatal period. That especially concerns the patients with the antenatal forms of Bartter syndrome. And we believe that this neonatal period and the outcome of this period is critically important, maybe for the kidney function in the long term. You will be asked certain clinical symptoms, which is pretty simple because they are simply answered by yes, no, or unknown, and a number of biochemical data. This might be more complicated, especially in patients that were not treated initially in your center. So we still have to see which of these items remain mandatory or might be optional in the future in the sense that you don't have to fill them in, especially not in cases of Gitelman syndrome, for example, for which these initial items might not be important. And in the long-term follow-up, basically, the follow-up visits are much more, much leaner, and there are not too many values that have to be put in. Critical is renal function and serum electrolytes, which should, I think, be available in most cases and should not pose a special problem. The more optional items like renin and aldosterone might not be available for each visit, but that should be no problem during follow-up. And on the right side, you see the medical part. The medication, critically important from my point of view, is the electrolyte supplementation, which should be provided as different electrolyte preparations or salts that are supplemented, as well as the endomethathin that's not shown here, or the selective COX-2 inhibitors, for example. If we now look at the current inclusion rate of the subregistry, in the upper row, you can see how many patients basically are included in the main registry at the moment, which should be around 350 people maybe. And about half of those, although only from 14 centers, meanwhile, are now included in the subregistry, which from my point of view is quite a success already. And the number is growing every week, so that I had to update these figures even from the meeting in Venice, and the number is still growing. And besides the molecular defined patients, there is also a number of the unresolved cases, and we might come back to that later on and maybe try to help the clinicians that take care of these unresolved cases in order to maybe genetically analyze those. If we take a first look, we are a young subregistry, so this is basically the first data we analyzed. We have a number of patients, like I said before, that are included in the registry prenatally, or that manifested prenatally, I have to say, and a significant number of those with acute renal failure. We have a follow-up time that differs from about 5 years to, let's say, into adolescence in most of the patients and in most of the diagnoses, especially here shown for Gitelman. But we have, on the other hand, a significant rate of CKD during follow-up, and I indicated in red. I'm not able to see this myself at the moment because of the Zoom surface here. But there's a significant number of patients with CKD during follow-up, and also with proteinuria, which might indeed be related as an indicator of renal deterioration, for example. And if we try to summarize this, or if we would like to provide percentages of patients that are in renal failure, you can see this especially for Bartter type 1 and 2. On the left side, Bartter type 4 is shown, for which we know that patients almost invariably proceed to chronic renal failure. And I believe 3 of those are already transplanted. And the single patients bears a specific variant in BSND that does not confer a complete loss of function and explains why he stays with a normal renal function. But for the antenatal Bartter forms, it shows that a significant number develops chronic renal failure over time. And we hope to be able to answer what's related to this chronic renal failure, or might be causative indomethacin treatment, natural cause of disease. I think that's one of the main goals or one of the main problems that we try to solve with the subregistry during follow-up. For Gitelman, there might be more sophisticated questions, which I'm not going too much into detail now. We had an extensive survey the last month by the Dutch group, who was also trying to monitor the quality of life of Gitelman syndrome, for example. And this might be another issue during long-term follow-up. So this was, in a bit shorter time, hopefully, the presentation of the Bartter subregistry. We hope to proceed to an evaluation and maybe publication in the near future. But for first, I hope that many of you will be able to include their patients, especially as soon as the basic data section is optimized. Thank you.